There really truly are two kinds of MBTI now circulating in online communities on the internet. They both claim to be MBTI. That adds confusion. In my view, it would be better for one of them, as that I will explain in detail in a moment. It would be better if one of them continues to call itself MBTI and if the other one started calling itself Jungian. It would help not only with, sort of telling them apart, but also with honestly determining which one is serious and which one is less serious. Okay? And the reason why I want to discuss this is because I have noticed in my community, especially on my Discord server, because this is where I interact with people from my community every day. And you know that if you want to join the Fourfold, which is my Discord server, our Discord server, join us there, interact with us there every day. Also access my whole library of long format deep dive videos exclusive for patrons, usually 20 to 30 minutes every 2-3 weeks on a topic of your choice. I'm thinking that today I will release either a video on what would an NI utopia look like, or exploring further the question of the transitional nature of INFJs as beings, transitional beings, NI dominance and the transitional area. It's a notion that is very important in psychology and to understand NI dominance better. Anyway, so if you want to join me on Patreon, support my work, make sure this channel keeps going. I could not do this without you, and I will not be able to do this without you. A few bucks a month or a few bucks a year. The link to my Patreon is below. I thank you very much. So, conversation especially with people on Discord, allows me to take the pulse, of NI dominant concerns. But there's not just NI dominance, so also the concerns of people who have other dominant functions, or people of other types. And something that I've noticed is that there is this worry that sometimes people have. So people, on my server typically, I have to say, have clearly a Jungian understanding of their type. So they've done a lot of qualitative self-work, a lot of qualitative reading. Including an interaction with me, they are very open to deeper exploration of the unconscious, of their fantasy, the inner architecture of their fantasies and so on. So I would consider them people who are quite serious when it comes to, engaging with the notion of their type that has depth, that has richness, that is full. It's a full notion. It's not an empty notion. It's not an empty shell. And yet, even they sometimes experience doubt as to whether they truly are ENTP or INFJ or INTP. I don't know, just whatever comes to mind. And that in itself is kind of healthy. It's an encouragement to further exploration, further excavation of the unconscious processes, and so on. That is healthy. You don't want to be too sure what your type is, too kind of narrow-minded. That is not a good predictor of being correct about your type. But sometimes the reason why they get sort of harried by doubts is that they would say things like, well, I listened to this self-proclaimed or self-typed INTP online, and they described how they function, their experiences, and I don't relate. So I'm like, maybe I'm not an INTP. Or I read this forum post by this self-typed INTJ, and the way they experience the world is just so different from mine. I don't think that I can be that. And that all humans do this. This is the human condition in a lot of ways, but usually what happens there is that they don't take the distinction into account between MBTI and Jungian, okay? What I call MBTI, at least for the purposes of clarification in this video, is a superficial understanding of type, either based on tests arguably one of the worst ways of determining your type. Either based on what I consider, on the whole, not terribly profound typings based on so-called objective systems. And lastly, that's arguably the worst, is people who are determined that they are of a certain type because they strongly identify with a well-known sort of media-savvy personality, content producer on YouTube, for example, who identifies as a type that they clearly are not, right? So you get Wednesdays identifying as an INFJ, and then a lot of people probably assume that because they relate to Wednesdays, there must be INFJs. Now, the reality is probably none of them are INFJ, okay? People identify with Michael Pierce. Good sign you're an INFJ. Doesn't mean that you are. Michael Pierce certainly is. But if you identify with him, well, that might give you a clue. If you identify with Wednesdays or with Frank James, and I like his stuff, you want to reconsider whether that's a good indicator of your type, okay? Jungian type is kind of a shortcut for, I've done a lot of qualitative work, I've done a lot of self-exploration, I've done maybe some shadow work, which is obviously a step toward really reckoning with your unconscious fantasy world. I've come to this conclusion, all right? The people who have identified their type in a Jungian way, all right, a Jungian type, should always ask themselves before they let the opinions or sort of self-reports of other people, before they let that influence whether or not they doubt their own type, they should always question, is that person's an MBTI kind of person, more shallow, more superficial kind of approach to type, or are they more Jungian? If they are a Jungian, then sure, there might be a good case for you engaging in a process of further exploration of how you see yourself, whether the way you see yourself is benefiting from sufficient insight into your own conscious processes, which may lead you to see yourself in certain ways that you don't quite realize are active when you do this. It's worthwhile if the other person has a Jungian understanding of their type, not an MBTI understanding of their type. Okay, guys, I hope that was clear. This is an important distinction to keep in mind from now on, and I probably will be using it again. What I'm interested in, you understand it now, hopefully, is a Jungian type, not really MBTI. Okay. Let me know if you think this distinction makes sense, because I still hear people, even people that are clearly in the Jungian type category, refer to their interests as interest in MBTI. Just a Jungian. I think it's better in every way. All right, guys. Don't forget that I have written 2 books on the INFJ personality. Jungian works, not MBTI works. MBTI is not really mentioned in these books, and for a good reason. My first one is called the Ecstatic Soul, a new look at the INFJ personality, and that's to this day the deepest investigation of the INFJ mind. Right? So definitely get it if you want a deep understanding of the INFJ mind. And we should get the sequel called the Infinite Soul, which kind of takes up from where the Ecstatic Soul left off and say, okay, this person with this kind of mind, how do they fare in the world? How can they look for meaning, value, and purpose in the world? Look for their particular place in the world. This is the Infinite Soul. First link below. Definitely get it if you want a deep understanding. The 2 books, of course, go well together, guys. So having said that, I wish you a lovely end of the day, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.